Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Camille McCutcheon, and my colleague is Peggy Kane, and we will be introducing ourselves a little bit more in just a slide or two from now. But we're going to talk about conversations, about collection strategies, and Peggy and I talk on a regular basis, and so some of this stems from some of the conversations that we've had probably over the past year or two.
Yeah.
And so just to highlight the code of conduct for the conference. So I work at the University of South Carolina Upstate, which is in Spartanburg, South Carolina. And we are one of the regional comprehensive campuses within the University of South Carolina system. USC Columbia is the flagship institution. And so we recently had a new Carnegie classification, so we're baccalaureate college diverse fields, and you can see our student FTE and our faculty. And so some of our largest degree programs are business, liberal arts, nursing, sciences, and teacher education. And really nursing is the reason why the school was founded, because there was a need for nurses in the Spartanburg area. So some of the first classes were taught at the regional hospital in Spartanburg. And so we have a number of master's degree programs, and those are growing, and you can see those. A lot of them are in the professional schools. So I'm going to turn it over to Peggy, and she's going to tell you about her institution.
Hi, and I am Peggy Kane. I am with everybody, again, we have the formal name, University of Alabama at Birmingham, but if you know anything about us, you know it's UAB. We come from an R1. We are, of course, heavily in the health sciences. So I've got School of Public Health, School of Dentistry, Optometry, Medicine, Nursing, and I think that's all. But the point of it is we have one library budget that covers every single discipline on our campus. So that's always very challenging for us. Our FTE is only about 19 to 20,000, but we are the largest employer in the state of Alabama, and in 24, the last facts and figures that came out, our grants and contracts were over $780 million. So we are heavy research, and so it's always an interesting challenge when you work with your resources budget, especially in these times. I'm going to give you a little bit. We'll go over a little bit just to give you some general topics on what we're going to cover today on the agenda. We're going to quickly go over and just talk about the overview of the library environment and some of the challenges we face. We're going to talk about budget cuts, some of the fun, seen, obvious, and then those unseen, foreseen things that just kind of pop up and come out of the crevices when you're like, oh man, just when I thought, and then it goes. And then some of the stuff that we have actually done, and to be very honest with you, Camille and I talk, because there are certain things, even though I have been doing it and have been at a research institute where I've had to be very budget conscious and have cut a lot of things over the course of my career, there are some things that we don't think about, or some things I haven't touched on yet. So we're going to look at some of the things we have learned from our institutions and through our practice on the tips and tools and dealing with those budget reductions, and then the impact of what does that mean going forward to our libraries. Because, you know, it's never like, oh, gee, golly whiz, it's it, and there we go. So, you know, as I say, this is an unfortunate ongoing conversation, I think, with all of us. And so we're just going to keep on rolling and see how far we can get, one step at a time.
And with this conversation, we certainly don't have all the answers. And so we want to have a conversation with you because I'm sure we can all learn from each other. So I'm very excited about this presentation today. So looking at challenges with internal, we mean internal within the library, and then external would be external within the library, like still on campus. So just some thoughts about internal, looking at like budget reductions or budget fluctuations, and are you having to plan for like a multi-year deal, and you know how the budget is not consistent, and then you might get more money one year and then not as much the next. And also looking at the impact of maybe you can't afford any multi-year agreements because you're not really sure what the budget's going to be like in a couple of years, and you don't want to put yourselves out there for a multi-year agreement when you may not have that money to purchase your for your subscriptions. Also, looking at multi-year agreements that ask for opt-out clauses that permits cancellations in recent years. I was looking at a multi-year agreement a few weeks ago, and it actually said there was no opt-out clause if you decided to join. And so up until that time, all of the agreements that Upstate has been involved in, we've had these opt-out clauses. So that's certainly a point of conversation, and we're going to be asking you all later on, what do you do? Because I know that some institutions aren't even allowed to sign agreements that have these no opt-out clauses. And so another internal challenge to think about is support from your library administration. And are they supporting you to get the word out about new databases? Or in this case, well, in Upstate's case, will the library administration support canceling a resource? A number of years ago, our former dean was, and I'm sure that some of you have had similar experiences where the person did not want to avoid a conflict of all costs, at all costs. So that meant this individual was not willing to go talk to faculty and say, hey, we're going to have to cut this big deal because we can't afford it and it's low usage. So I'll tell you a little bit more about that as we go along, but I think that's a really big internal challenge. And even your colleagues, sometimes your colleagues, I've had colleagues in the past who have not wanted to cut anything or not wanted to cut from their specific areas. And so that can be a challenge too. And just to be frank, because I'm a very frank person, I had one or two folks through the years that I've worked with who seemed to think that we had money trees growing in the parking lot behind the library and we could just buy anything we wanted to. But fortunately, it is not like that right now at my library. But I'm sure you have had similar experiences, but I think it needs to be acknowledged that those are a challenge, especially if, like, for instance, and I think I forgot to tell you what I did. I am over collection management at the library, and I've been in this position since around 2009. So it just makes the lives harder on the people in the library who do have to make these decisions, that everyone can be on board for them. So some external challenges also can be space reduction. I know many of us have been dealing with space being taken away from us by maybe the administration of the university for one reason or another and used for something that's not really library related, and hiring freezes. What if someone leaves in the middle of a hiring freeze? We lost our e-resources coordinator 3 years ago this month, and I don't see any way we're going to be able to rehire. So, just having to pick up these extra responsibilities in addition to what you are doing on a daily basis is certainly a challenge. And just what happens if that position is already in your budget for the fiscal year? I know that in our case, that money was wiped out as soon as that person left. So we didn't even have the option of saying we really need to rehire someone. And another external challenge too would be if you have strongly opinionated faculty, like departmental faculty members who They don't want their resources cut under any circumstances, even though they may not be used. Just being honest here, we've seen this. And something else, and I know this is widespread too, but it's been a huge concern of mine, is that when new programs are discussed, I just know at my institution, there's been a huge problem really ever since I've been here, and I've been at USC Upstate since 1998, that the existing programs really aren't fully funded like they should. And when there's talk of new programs, where is this money going to come from to support those new programs? And then when the existing programs are not really fully funded, and this trickles down to the library, because there are these forms and they just kind of like sign off that sure, that there are plenty of library resources for, whatever the new major is, but that may not be the case. Like, for instance, with us, we just started an engineering major this semester for the first time, and I spent a lot of yesterday going around talking to some of our vendors who specialize in engineering to try to get pricing and introduce myself to them, and I just feel like the administration really has no idea what these costs are going to be like for the library and these resources for engineering. So looking at some seen and unseen impacts also with budgets, you've got collections, and not all classes are taught every semester. You've got some taught every other year. Also, you've got some resources that are core, and you may need them for accreditation, and they're really expensive, but you've got to have them and support those. And looking at staffing too, sometimes an impact, if someone leaves or, something else happens like that, is that do the people in your library have the skill set to, say, compile statistics, for instance, or in our case, we have Alma, work with Alma. Now, of course, there's certainly training for Alma, but I'm just saying, some people have different interests and may have, skill sets that perfectly match jobs while others may not. So I think that's also something to keep in mind. And just maintaining resources to support existing areas, adding new content, say if there's a brand new database that's come out for a program that you've had for a long time, just trying to budget for that, new research initiatives, and also too is thresholds with FTE. And this is something that I've learned recently is like when you hit some of these thresholds, like I think it's like 5,000 FTE and 10,000, let's just use those kind of as examples, your subscription costs go up substantially. And trying to educate like your library dean who may not be too familiar with, collections and how pricing works, although they probably should be, and your administration over the school, they're very excited. Say like we hit 5,000 FTE a few years ago, and some of our database costs like tripled. So just trying to educate them to understand that's definitely can be an unseen impact as well. So I'm going to turn this over to Peggy for the next slide.
And we're going to talk a little bit about tools and techniques. Let me give you some background on me. I started at UAB shortly before the big downfall in 2008, 2009. Alabama is what they call a cash-based state. And we had, which means if the tax revenue isn't high enough, we have to pay the money back. Okay, so that year, in fact, I did a presentation here, we had a budget cut, we had proration, and then a month before our end of our fiscal year, we had the second round of proration again. So we basically lost about 50% of our overall budget. Not only are that in our materials, and at the time, my director, librarian and director, because we had two separate libraries, the health sciences and the academic, was very good. It did not want to touch staff, so everything came out of resources. So I literally got everything, okay? So some of the challenges I ran into is every single big deal went away. I am in an R1 institute. I am heavy research. It was not a pleasant situation on campus. I will say this, we went out and beat the bushes. Everything was in the newspaper, we were having meetings, we were doing all of this. So there were a lot of lessons learned with some of those conversations. Now we've gone back into some of the big deals. We've done, read and publish agreements, but there are a few things we're doing. Now, of course, I'll sign it up. Yeah, not me sign it, but UAB, we will go into a multi-year agreement. And I may not need what I call an opt-out clause in the thing, but we have to affirmatively be able to renew, which means I now have, if they don't want to put an opt-out, you still have to give me the ability to cancel and not affirmatively renew. Everything when we go through, I have built in, I always tell people I have to finagle. We had a new dean, and we've had some budget cuts the past couple of years since we came back from COVID. And she asked me for numbers for the overall budget. And I'm like, okay, materials budget. I don't mean, because when I talk about budget, I talk about resources only. So she asked me about that, and our financial officers have always gone, oh, we do 3 to 5%. Well, I don't. I do 5 to 7. So when you do it, I always up it a little bit. And so we were doing things like, we prepay. So we've got our journal management system, so we prepaid for the earlier year. So we didn't really cut it. We kind of pushed it off, so we were able to manage it to the point of where we could go through and, I don't pay it in August when my fiscal year ends in the end of September. I wait until October 1st when I roll into my new year. So I was paying things like that. So it sounds more like a shell game than it is, but it was a way to put the cost off with not necessarily cutting. Because to be very honest with you, after learning those lessons, I literally gutted the library the last time, which was not good. And so just trying to learn some of those things to go through it. So yes, if we can save money with the multi-year, we do it. If we cannot, we do not. I will tell you this, a multi-year big deal for us was cheaper because when we went solo, when we were doing individual titles, we were paying, I'm trying to figure out how to put this politely, we were paying list price. So you were actually paying more for your individual subscriptions, even though you were getting less content than you were when you were in the big deal. And so it was like, okay, but we were caught, we had to do it, and we went from there. When we do things, we build in 3 to 5 years. When I do read and publish agreements, it's like, that's fine and dandy. I need publishing statistics back 10 years. I need information about what your cost will be once I get out of this, what will happen. So looking at those pieces, looking at who's on campus, what are they doing? Are they editors? Are they this? Are they that? And enlisting those pieces. So it becomes an ongoing conversation with us. We try to, as I say, be very proactive. I have been in the middle of my library and had people be very angry with me and not be very polite in front of students and things like this because I've cut resources. So I go through and I attempt to avoid that in all possibility. Because, you don't want to be, I'm always the bad guy. And it's like, you don't want to be that bad guy. So you try to put these things in. When I have money, if I can purchase instead of license, then I'll do it. I seek out, okay, what are your annual access fees? No, sorry, not going to cut it. I can't do it. We look at annual access fees. Yeah, but if it's going to cost me more to do that, then we'll seek out another resource. So, things like that, if I can get a low annual access fee or service fee, then those are going to be handled differently than my budgets on my subscriptions. And so, that may happen. If I can do a prepay for something small, that might work. If I get a discount, if I don't get a discount, then I'm sorry, it doesn't work. So those are some of the things that, and it sounds like little bits, but If I'm told I have to cut $1 million and I don't lose a resource, that works. And, you know, we cut, but I lost one resource last year. One. Okay? And no, that resource was not $1 million. Trust me. I work with an acquisitions manager, and I'm very lucky. She has been at UAB for over 40 years. And when I'm asked for the numbers, I say, okay, I need to hit this number. And she'll laugh and she'll go, okay, so she pulls what we've paid, we do all this, and she said, what? And I said, no, I need to hit that number. So I'll go back and I'll go, okay, cost increase. How can I do this? What are the anticipated? What am I looking at? I do my research as far as what is possible. You talk about engineering. What are the possibility of the potential cost? Will I get that? Not necessarily. But if I don't ask, the door's not going to even be open. So those are some of the things I have done. It doesn't mean that they're all going to work, and it doesn't mean that's everything, because there's a lot of little stuff out there that we still are going through and doing. But it's trying to at least come up with and think outside the box, because you've got to be able to protect. I mean, I'm not doing this, oh, Peggy wants to keep every resource that we have. No, I don't. But I want to make sure that, you know, I don't want somebody on the other end of campus getting upset or not being able to finish things. When we canceled everything back in the mid-2000s, early 2000s, we canceled Westlaw. Guess who got the most use out of Westlaw? Was it my business? No. It was my medical community. So my doctors were calling us, going, why can't I get to that? Where is it? And it was like, so you have to be able to, at a large campus, where is it? We never know where they're coming from. So trying to do that, partnering. I've also partnered with my School of Business. I pay for the base platform, but I'm not going to pay for the data sets that sit on it. You do. And they're like, but I will be glad to do the grunt work. I will negotiate the agreement. I will be glad to work through and to get the best price for you, but I can't pay for the data set if I pay for the platform. And getting those in, but getting them so you have the paper trail. So you don't get caught with, oh, well, we no longer can do that, libraries. You now have to do it. Because usually that's what's happened before. Oh, well, our budget was cut also. So you have to be able to, well, in that case, you and I have agreed this is what we've got. And I'm not saying I do this on my own. This is never me, Peggy, doing this. Peggy negotiates. Then I go to the dean signs off, and so it becomes a conversation with us. So those are some of the things I have done at my institution, and I know Camille has done other things because she's told me, and I'm like, oh, that's a good idea. So anyway, I'm going to turn it over to her.
Well, I do want to say that working at a state institution, my guiding principle is to be a good steward of the public funds. And even as we support our mission and curriculum, research initiatives, that's what I always keep in mind. I want to talk about standing orders for just a minute. I know that a lot of people have either gutted their standing orders or just get a few. And a number of years ago, I did go through and weed a lot of the cancel. I evaluated and canceled a lot of the standing orders. But something I found out that you can do, and we have Gobi, that's how we get our standing orders, is that you can ask Gobi to put a ship hold on your standing order plan. So, for instance, what we do is around May, like the first part of May, we email Gobi and say, we want to put a ship hold so that we don't receive any standing orders through that gray area, when our fiscal year is July through June. So we don't want to be really receiving any standing orders like in June and July. And normally we lift that hold in September. So we will email and say, we'll tell them up front, we want to put on the hold and then lift it in September. And then normally around the first part of September, they'll, email us and say, are you ready to lift the hold? And a lot of times, although we're not paying very much money with standing orders, every little bit counts. So I don't like to really release that ship hold until we get our budget numbers. And we don't always get our budget numbers until like mid to late September. So that's something that we've done. And, you know, it takes that stress out of not knowing when you might just get this random invoice for a standing order. So I think that's really worked for us. And we started doing that about 3 or 4 years ago, I believe. I had alluded to the fact that we had a big deal and we didn't have library administrative support for going to the faculty about that. So I wanted to give you a little bit more information. I inherited that big deal. And you know, with these it was a publisher deal. And with some deals, they align better than other. Some deals are better for some schools than others. And really, the size of my institution really didn't need that big deal, to be honest. And so we had low usage, and it was just a high cost per usage. So the dean that I referred to retired about 3 or 4 years ago. And our new dean, who did have a background with collections, was willing to go to bat with us and see about canceling this deal. So he talked with the other deans, he talked with the provost about this. He showed the numbers. We actually set up meetings with like the School of Nursing and the School of Business just to answer their questions. We gave them like the title list. And so we just laid it out, and I worked with the groundwork on getting this all together. And they told us it's fine to cancel. We canceled it. And that's really been one of our saving graces the last couple of years, because canceling that big deal has allowed me to pay for these increases that we're getting with our other database subscriptions. So I can't emphasize how important library administrative support is for collections, especially in having to go through a cancellation. Did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, I was going to say, I think as we all know, it's an ongoing conversation. You know, those conversations are, I need to keep, and it's like, well, wait a minute, how we have this thing in 20 places. Why do you need to keep that one? And you know, because these aggregated databases, we appreciate them, but you know, why do I need a standalone journal? Why do you have to have that? So give me some information about those pieces. You know, we have done several things. In fact, when we've canceled before, it's not an easy thing. It's one of those things where it's always an ongoing year discussion for us. And even when I lost, and it wasn't, we lost one resource and didn't purchase ebook collections this past year, but it was a conversation. It started in, our fiscal year runs October 1st through September 30th. So the conversation about what's going to happen next year started the January before. So it was like, what can we do? How can we do this? And so going through and identifying these resources and how we could put some of this stuff off. And then it was, as Camille was talking about, goes out to the faculty. It was like, oh, internal faculty. Oh, I don't know. Well, because I didn't quite touch anybody's particular resource, you know, an area, it was okay. Because you know, a lot of them were like, oh, wait a minute, that's mine, I need it. It hasn't been used in 20 years, but okay. Now, I will say this, though, and especially the size of my institution, I think part of the problem I have with us, for example, our medical, it's more medical students, anatomy, basic anatomy. Basic anatomy is taught, they all have to take it, I believe, like the beginning of the fall semester. But it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody that needs it takes it then. So, but they may not be able to take it that year. So it's one of those things where you have to figure out when they're going to need it and how they do it. We do not believe in, and we do not set up random trials. You know, we have implemented things like, you know, when I've purchased materials and I negotiate with my vendor, and they'll make a comment about, oh, you know, Peggy, if you do this, we'll throw this particular tool in place. You know, Gail has done it for us, team has done it for us, you know. It's like, okay. So, you know, and those are just, you know, examples. It's like, so that means I can get that without any additional charge? They're like, yeah, you spend that. I'm like, okay. So we figure out how we can do that, and then if I can negotiate that thing so I get it either in perpetuity or I get it for 5 to 6 years and no additional cost, then it's like, okay. So I'm adding additional pieces to my content. So not only am I then, showing that, okay, I'm at least maintaining, but I'm also, hey, what about this tool? What about this? Will this make your life easier? Can we do it? It was free. I'm not going to tell my faculty that, but I am going to turn around. I'm not even going to necessarily tell my internal faculty, because to be very honest with you, and I'm talking about reference, and I'm talking about the teaching pieces, because as long as they've got it and they have it and it's not, and they're using it, then they don't need to know that I got a deal by finagling with them and negotiating with them, because that's fine. They just know that it's something they can use, they can push it out and get things going. We try to be very proactive, and I will say this, we're not big as far as staff goes. And yes, when our former librarian was there, we had like over 100 people in both libraries. Then we had a dean come in, we dropped down to 60, and that didn't include students. So we've built back up a little. We're still not, up flush, okay? Over COVID, my position at that time was head of collection management services. And I had one of my metadata librarians working. I had one that was out for a little bit. And then I had one staff person in metadata, and I had an acquisitions manager and a processing person, and it was me. So we basically, and we ran it, and it's like, so yeah, no, it's not easy. So when you talk about staffing, was I arguing for it? Yes. Was the budget there? Yeah, no, because our old dean eliminated positions and took it out of the budget line. So having to build those back in and having those conversations with our dean, with our financial officer, no, this is not a new position, this is a replacement. Well, it's not in the budget line. Well, you have to build it back into the budget line and the ask going forward. It's like, we can't just do this. I mean, for what I was doing, and at the time just running through this stuff, it's unfortunate that you have to do it. I have been told I give too much information, but my frustration on some of it is, if I don't do this, you do not understand, we need this. I don't need it, I don't care. I don't care if I balance my health sciences resources with my academic. The only reason I care is because I need to be fair to my UAB community. And I need to make sure that my faculty get what they need, which means, my docs on the health sciences side, if they need a resource like Westlaw, we don't have it now, but we have Lexis. Can they use it? Is there something that they have that I can provide for them? Different things like that. And then working through the partnerships, getting out and basically beating the bushes, doing it with, on campus, being almost a pain in the neck to library administration, going, well, we can't do that. And I'll be very honest with you, it's not fun. And there have been times where it's like, what is it I have? And laughingly, it's like, Peggy, you have 10 minutes. I'm like, oh, darn it. Now you get 10 minutes, Peggy. You can't keep going over. We cannot have these discussions, 10 minutes. And I'd be like, oh, man. So I come back again, 10 minutes. So I'm like, okay. So, but it's not like, it's like, oh, gee, golly, this is fun. But if you don't, and trust me, it's a pain in the neck, but if that's pretty much what I've had to do, because it's the only way I can, we have been able to survive with our community. So, thank you, Camille. So I guess our question to you is, what are you guys doing? Where are you in this process? Are you like beating your heads against the wall? Can you, by law, and at one point, can you have a multi-year agreement? Because with us, oops, I didn't mean to hit that. With us, as long as it was resources, is it a service agreement? Well, I can't prepay for services in Alabama. So how can I manage that? So now it's a resource, so I can pay for that. So how are you managing those? How are you managing these pieces? You know, every time we do transformative read and publish agreements, and everybody asks, how are you doing it? You can go to, now in the Office of Scholarly Communication, go look at what we're doing to document that return on investment. We literally, there's a web page. All of this information, we are trying to be as transparent. Thank goodness we have somebody in our library that markets it. And we are on social media. We are out there going in the thing, hey, we gave you back. You know, my concern, I was telling Camille earlier today, we lose space. So does that mean they don't think we're relevant? So what are we doing? You know, so we're trying to get out there and basically be a pain in the neck to these folks. So what are you guys doing? Are we on the same boat? Are we doing the same thing? Yes? No? As I say, I'm in a boat. I'm in an R1. I am not an ARL library, but I have all these you name it. I walk through the airports and I see UAB medicine all over the place. That's us, you know, but I have to support it. You know, okay, I'll tell you guys a funny story since you won't answer my questions. Okay, over COVID, I was in a meeting, and there's probably some librarians that still remember, and we were trying to come up with tools because we had to flip. And so I laughed. Well, coming from a health sciences thing, I got this phone call from one of my guys who was teaching. He was head of anatomy and forensics, and he said, you know, Peggy, he said, we really need a resource that will replace the time the students are spending with cadavers. I'm like, oh, darn it. We were in a limited business model, so how can we make sure our students, because then too, during COVID, they didn't allow you to donate cadavers. So it's like, okay, so fine. So we did some evaluation and things like that, but it's like, you know, we're talking about stories during COVID. It's like, yeah, I had to get up a resource that replaced cadavers. I will tell you this, there are some out there, and they're 3D, and they're very good, and our folks are using them, but, you know, those are the off-the-wall things we have to deal with, and I had to make room in my budget to come up with it. So, questions, answers?